We are here at the legendary 17th hole at TPC Sawgrass, home of the Players Championship. Meet John and Pete and their special guests and enjoy 4 days of VIP access March 10th through the 13th. It's going to include 2 days of live trading with all the Market Rebellion analysts. You're going to get to meet John, Pete, and special guests. We do have limited seats. There's only 10 seats available. Sign up below. Make sure you get here. We want to see you at the Players Championship.
Good morning. It is Friday morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion. I got to tell you something. The bumpy ride continues in the final 2 hours of the day. That has kind of come back into play for us, that final, anywhere from that 15-minute, 30-minute, 2 hours, we get huge moves. And that was exactly what yesterday was about. It was a bumpy day already. But in the final couple hours, we actually dropped about 260 points on the Dow. We finished the day down over 500 points, 520 points. You look over at the NASDAQ, the final 2 hours, nearly 200 points to the downside. That was down 540 points, or a 3.7% move in the NASDAQ yesterday. A lot of that, as we know, Facebook related. We'll get into that in just a second. The volatility index, we had a range 22.5, call it all the way up to 26. We finished the day a little over 24. That makes some sense that we'd have that kind of volatility. And actually, I'm a little surprised we didn't close a little bit higher than the levels where we did, since we had that spike. But getting a little bit closer to the weekend, that starts to price in. Now, you look over at the volumes, 41 million contracts yesterday. Another really, really incredible day. Obviously, with all the news and the push to the downside for Facebook, options were absolutely on fire in that name yesterday. And as John talked about yesterday on the halftime report, actually implied volatilities were starting to come in a little bit. And that makes some sense. You're going into the catalyst earnings. You come out of that, even with the numbers being bad and the stock movement that we had, a lot of that implied volatility does start to come out of some of those names. Doesn't always happen, but it usually does happen that way. Apple had about 1.5 million contracts, but Facebook yesterday traded about 2 million contracts. So it was a very, very busy day. Ford was over 1 million contracts. Snap was over 1 million contracts. You get the idea. Snap, very interesting story. And what they announced last night after the bell, that was pretty interesting. Facebook, of course, that was the story of the day. Stock was absolutely hammered. It was down 85 points, down 26%. It was $237 a share. It just absolutely drained capital from that stock yesterday. Very similar to, or in a lot of ways similar at least, to PayPal and that beating that has taken as well. So we've had some good. Look back to Apple, look back to Microsoft, and we've got some bad. You look at this PayPal number, you look at the Facebook number, and then, of course, last night we've got Snap, we've got Amazon. We'll get into that in just a second. Communication services down huge yesterday. That connects right to that Facebook number, getting slaughtered to the downside. A lot of what was getting hit yesterday was in the technology space, but also you look over at the chips. You look at something like Cuervo, that was down about 10% yesterday. Amazon, actually, yesterday before their earnings, that was down about 8% or so before it had that big earnings and the pop that had. Honeywell got beaten really badly yesterday. That was down well over 7%. Of course, I mentioned PayPal as well. You throw in Marvell, you look at DocuSign, Salesforce, Microsoft. Microsoft was down 4%. That's a pretty monstrous move. Didn't even get talked about really because of the fact that so many other names out there were down even bigger, that these are kind of like forgotten. But monster stock like Microsoft, that has an impact obviously on the NASDAQ as well. There were a few winners yesterday, not very many. T-Mobile was up about 10% yesterday. We had Humana, that jumped about 6%. We talked about this yesterday, but Ralph Lauren actually had a really nice number in Allstate. So not all was bad, but most of everything was really getting dragged to the downside. You look at the Dow, you look at the S&P, and you look at the NASDAQ, that gives you the full story. They were hitting just about everything. Now we come into today. Dow down about 150, 160 points in the pre-market. Yes, I know it was even lower than that. It was bouncing around a little bit, but let's just call it about 150 points to the downside, and the NASDAQ kind of bouncing around up or down about 20 points or so. The NASDAQ actually has taken off pretty nicely. At least it did right before I came on. It was up about 150, 170 points. It was starting to pull back down again. So wouldn't be surprised if it's holding on to triple digits, but a little bit closer to that 100 level. But I look over at the Dow and it was getting hit again. It actually rallied, got back up. And then the next thing you know, boom, started to get pulled back once again. Last I looked, it was down, call it a little over 100 and some odd points, 150 points, something like that. It's all over the place. We know that. That's the movements that we are having, that intraday volatility. I think that gets lost with a lot of people because they just look at an open and a close, and there is so much more to it than that. And that intraday volatility and the velocity of these moves that we talk about each and every day. We also talk about volumes, the triple Vs. We have had it all in January and this early part of February that we're hitting into right now. Crude had a great day yesterday. Crude's having another great day today. We're looking at crude well over 90, close to 92 or more, and it just continues that path. And it's been something we've been talking about here at Market Rebellion for well over a year, call it 16 months, 14, 16 months or so. We have been watching all of this option paper that has been flowing into energy, including yesterday, and it has not slowed down. We did have a pause, but other than that short pause late last year, it has been full steam ahead. And that pause, actually, we watched oil come back down from the 80s back to the upper 60s, and then it just kind of kicked right back in again. Here we find ourselves 92. You can guess there's a lot going on in the energy space right now. Of course, the 10-year up over 1.9 today. It was 188 early. It was about 1.9, somewhere in that sort of category right now in terms of the movement. It's broken back out. We were talking about how it was sort of stuck in a little bit of an area there, 175 to 1.8. It's well over those levels right now, and we'll see how long that holds, or maybe even starts to test that 2 number. We'll see. That's something a little bit in front of us still. So volatility index, early on, 25, 26. We started to get a little bit into the 24s. If we continue to see a little bit of the pressure that we are starting to see, or we're starting to see on the Dow, and maybe a little bit pullback in the NASDAQ, if that were to happen, I'm sure we're going to see the volatility start to creep back up a little bit. But remember, it's Friday. We got the weekend to price in as well. So energy early on, it was up about 2%. Next thing you know, it was up 3.25%. You look over at consumer discretionary, that was up about 1.5%. Next thing you know, it was up about 3%. You get the idea with some movement, a little bit of a pullback on tech, because tech actually early on down a little bit, down about maybe a little over 0.5%. Then it was up about 0.5%. We've got a lot of movement within these sectors going on right now. So earnings and the impacts that we're having. Amazon, we all know that story by now. We've all seen these numbers. AWS, unbelievable. The pricing power that they've got. Prime, once again, raising those prices for the yearly membership to Prime. That's something. All of that giving a nice, big, huge boost, about 11% today for Amazon. Then you look over at Ford. A little bit of a surprising miss. They talked about supply chain, this, that, and the other. The focus is on EVs, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it wasn't too long ago, about 2 weeks ago or so, mid-January, where we were about 25 on Ford. Here we are now dropping into the upper teens. That's a pretty significant pullback. We'll see if that's something that's going to continue in that direction. Might even get a little bit of a clue for that with what we're seeing in the options today. So we're just still digesting Facebook. Then you look over at Snap. Everybody assumes that, well, if it's bad for Facebook, it's got to be bad for Snap. Apparently, that's not the story. And when you look at that Snap and their earnings and their numbers and their DAUs and all the rest of it, it really was a very, very impressive quarter. So doubling the estimates, they had a strong outlook. It's hard to find too much negative in there, and hats off to what they've been able to accomplish in Snap. But that's a stock that has been getting bashed to the downside. Yes, we've had some call buying in there. But will that be enough of a move? It's a big, monstrous move. Will it be enough of a move today? So Amazon, I mentioned, up about 9% now. I think it's been anywhere between 9 and 11%, thereabouts. So we've seen some strength there, there's no doubt. But take a look at what's going on in energy, and specifically these beta names. They are on fire and all moving to the upside. We talk about the price of crude all the time. When you look at Occidental, you look at APA, you look at Marathon, you look at Diamondback, you look at Devon, you look at Pioneer, yes, all those names on a nice move to the upside. At least last I looked, they were up 3% or more on another big move to the upside. By the way, we continue to see the option activity build in the energy space. Yesterday, multiple hits across the board in energy once again. So we'll see if that continues. Chevron being one of the big leaders for the Dow today, as a matter of fact. Chinese names, at least starting off the day in positive territory and looking pretty good. Clorox, not so good, down about 11%. That was a pretty big disappointment. Then you look at Ford adding to that as well. Then you look at something like an Air Products down about 6% as well. So builders across the board, builders having a little bit of pressure on them right now, whether it's DHI or Pulte or Lennar, any of these names, a little bit of pressure right now. I look over at Skyworks, there's some pressure there. Going back to the semiconductor space. Lucid in the EV space, down about 2%. It seems like we talk about Lucid every single day, and it seems like every single day it's in the negative. So that's the backdrop to everything. I will be on the halftime report. I will be on the 5 p.m. show at Fast Money as well today. Going to be on there with Scott Wapner today at noon. Then we got Melissa Lee, of course, 5 o'clock. It's going to be exciting. Oh, yeah, I did not forget. We got 2 unusuals for you as well. Now, talk about energy, right? How about HP? And I'm not talking about Hewlett Packard. I'm talking about Hammerich and Payne. We're talking about oil drilling here. Stock is right around 31.20. They're going out in time a little bit. They're buying the March 35 calls there. 10,000 of those calls, trading anywhere between 80 cents and $1. That's a pretty decent sized trade. I mentioned energy. There you go. There's your little one. Now, I also mentioned when we were talking about Ford, what are people looking at right now in Ford? So I don't know. It's too difficult to determine what they're doing, if they're hedging right now in Ford, or are they actually negative right now in Ford? I have not made a move on this trade, but I will tell you what the trade is that we were seeing. 14,000 of the March 25th expiring, the 17.5 puts, stock 1780. These are right there. It makes me think that it's less about an insurance policy and more about a little bit of negativity. So I'm still studying that. I'm still looking at that. I'm giving it a good eye. Those are going for a little over $1. Call it $1.30 or so for those options. As I mentioned, 14,000 of those puts being bought in Ford. So a little bit of disappointment. Is it the supply constraints? Is it that they won't have enough? They've got some strength in EV, but it looks like after being all the way up towards that 25, maybe it was a little too much too fast. It's been pulling back, and here we sit right now underneath 18. So something to keep an eye on, at least, to see if we see any more option activity in Ford, any follow-up to that as well. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you at the noon show, and that is not that far away. Have a great day.